How many are aware? Please put your hands up. That's about 40%. So that unfortunately happened as recently as trust me, this was not planned. The evening was not planned by us, not morning. But it has coincided with such a topical discussion we're going to have. And unfortunately, that is the reality of today's geopolitical condition. And I'd like to call upon my eminent panelists to discuss more about it. We've chosen the panel very carefully. We've had a mix of lawyers with different specialities, each claiming their position in this volatile sanctions and geopolitics developments that are happening every day. So may I call my dear neighbor, Nijo. Can you please join us? We're going to be very strategic about it. We're not going to keep all lawyers in one group. So we're going to keep lawyers, ship owners, lawyers, commercial guys, so that you'll have a little bit of a distance between each other. Nitin Mathur, Al-Sea Marine, please join us. Nitin, thank you for coming all the way from Abu Dhabi and sparing time to speak from a ship owner's perspective, asset owner's perspective. You can sit, no, you go back. You can sit next to Nijo. We call Omar, who shares a wonderful sense of humor with me. Every time we meet, he has something nice and funny to say and inspires me with his one-liners. Omar, please join us. Omar runs a very successful practice and heads Al-Tamimi's shipping. Please have a seat here. I'll call my fellow committee member from Nautical Institute, Vikram Mathur, to join us. Vikram will be speaking from a commercial perspective. I've not seen many straight-talking people in the commercial world as Nitin, Vikram does. Vikram. And panelists, please join us from Stevenson Harbour. I happened to attend one of the breakfast sessions where panelists spoke an absolute layman's language. As a lawyer, that is, I think, an art to simplify it and dumb it down for people like us to understand. We promise us to do that today as well. So thank you very much. As you can see, I've been a very lazy moderator and haven't spoken and introduced you all at all. I think it's best that you all do it yourselves. So I want to start. There are some initial questions which are lying here. Just some house rules for the attendees. We're going to have Slido barcode there. So please avoid putting anonymous. There is a provision to put your name up. We would love to know who's asked the questions. But if you really want to ask something sensitive and don't want to put your name up, by all means, be anonymous. But if the question requires clarification, we're going to have it hybrid. We will take a decision. Whoever the question is diverted towards, please request the person asking the question to clarify if you think the question requires a bit more clarity. So, I want you all to give us an opening statement along with your introduction. And we'll go from this end to this end. Nijo, you go first. Please introduce yourself and give us an opening remark on what does geopolitics and sanctions mean to you in your day-to-day working. Some practical examples, stories would be nice to hear as well. About a minute and a half.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Nijo Joseph. My claim to fame is that I'm the neighbor of Captain Zarir Rani. I live 2 houses next to him. Other than that, I'm also a practitioner of the arts. I'm a lawyer by profession. Got about this September is my 20th year as a lawyer in the United Arab Emirates. I specialize in things that flies or floats and the trade that they do in between. Basically, I'm a transportation and trade lawyer, and I do bits and bobs of finance, but I'm a banking and finance lawyer otherwise. Geopolitics and sanctions. Well, what can I say? In one word, the first word that pops into my brain is uncertainty, because both are uncertain in the times that we live in, with the introduction that Captain just gave. And I thank my good friend Menelaus, who was a colleague of mine in a previous life as well. He was the one who actually alerted a lot of us in the room to the unfortunate event that's occurred in Qatar, in Doha. So this just tells you what can happen in a few minutes, and over a period of time, this plays out. I remember, I think it was an ICS event, if I was not mistaken, when I was speaking in 2022 about the sanctions on Russia. What was funny was that the talk began at 5:30, and by the time we finished around 7:30, it didn't make any sense because the sanctions had already been overturned, and new sanctions had come into play. And so it was just 2 hours of my life wasting 2 hours of somebody else's life talking about things that was irrelevant, but which was relevant a couple of years ago, a couple of minutes ago. But such is the state of life and such is the state of geopolitics. But it's always good. I think the panel is quite an exclusive panel. So I think what we are here to learn mutually is how do we live in these uncertain times, and how do we actually prepare for the uncertainties in the best ways that we can. This is my God.
Thank you. Again, over to Nitin, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nitin Mathur. I'm a maritime professional for the last 30 years. Went out to sea first, and then I've been in commercial shipping for over 20 years. I lead the commercial shipping part of Allseas Marine. Today we have 18 ships and growing. So as a ship owner, I think we are in a very fluid situation right now with 30 different conflicts going on as we speak today in various parts of the world. With the imminent threat of sanctions, ever-changing, as Nito just said, ever-changing scenarios. So we just have to be very agile. We have to be very watchful. And being a ship owner, with one of the only ones in the whole supply chain who's actually got some real money in the game, I think we also need to be rather cautious. So, and that'll be my theme today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Omar, the local perspective. Please tell us about yourself. And
Thank you very much. You keep always missing to say that I'm good looking in my introduction, but I forgive you for that. I mean, judging that I don't have hair and a hatch at my back, I'm a shipping lawyer. I'm the regional head of transport and insurance with Tamimi. And if I would say there's a black comedy when it comes to sanctions and the challenge of law, OFAC itself is not even a law. It's a presidential directive issued in 1950. And actually, OFAC is called to be the strongest unknown non-governmental agency in the world. So if there's even a challenge to what us as a legal practitioners in our everyday life, it's sanctions. Because actually the scariest form of sanctions in the world is not even legal when it comes to that. And actually it's a gray area between a judicial institution and an executive institution in the United States. And someone who's there has no right of appeal or extension or time frames or anything that the legal system will give to give that. So to us, and to me, sanctions, who became the norm rather than the exception, and in an area, as my friend Zeri said, the locality of our area, you're talking about Yemen, Sudan, Somalia, Iraq, Iran, and to some extent, Lebanon. You have the Iranian sanctions, the Russian sanctions, the North Korean sanctions, and all those countries I mentioned sanctions. So sanctions became the norm rather than the exception in our daily life. And is there a law or a textbook for us to follow to avoid sanctions? The answer from the legal perspective, and I hope I will be supported by my colleagues, is no. I leave you with this comment.
thank you very much. That was very insightful, and you play a very important role being speaking from a local perspective, being heading the local law firm from Strasbourg. So
I hope I will not be sanctioned after this.
you will not
Let's see how that goes.
What happens in this room stays in this room. And whoever will whistleblow, we will find him out. That is our role as a casualty investigator. You'll be the casualty in this case. But saying that, let me bring in another commercial mind here. Captain Vikram Mathur has come all the way. He presents 80 ports. He does a lot of placement of ships. But Vikram, please introduce yourself and tell us what geopolitics and sanctions mean to you in your business, in your commercial world, please.
Good evening, everyone. Captain Mathur, Vikram Mathur here. First of all, thank you, Zarir, and thanks to ICS for inviting us here. With this current situation, what we can see right now, and as Zarir had just pointed out, about an hour back, we had an incident there in Doha. From the ship owner's perspective, as well as me doing the owner's operations at Abu Dhabi ports, it is very important that we all be prepared in today's times for being flexible in our operations. I'm talking from the operations point of view. We need to be agile all the time, and especially with the changing world scenarios, things can change even during a voyage. So we all must have a plan B as well when we plan a voyage in this start. So it starts right from the planning stage when we do the chartering. From there on, when we start, we need to first look at the geopolitical situation before sending a ship, before starting on a discussion and taking on a new venture, I would say, on each occasion. That involves, of course, legal, commercial, local knowledge, as well as some technical background. Now, a lot of people may ask me why technical. It's because in the current situation, whether a ship could be allowed in a particular area, depending on a condition, that is something which very few people look into when they think of commercially. But I come from a background where I've been a technical superintendent, and I saw a lot of incidents where we were sent to a location where the ship would not be able to perform in certain circumstances. So obviously it was a loss at times earlier, but that's something which I always lay emphasis on, that whenever we book a voyage, whenever we do a charter operation, we must also take into consideration the commercial capability of the vessel which we are discussing. Of course, hand in hand, it goes with the geopolitical situation. Like we had recently the incident in the Red Sea, and a lot of people must have got caught unawares because since January 2024, we did not have an incident in the Red Sea for a long time, actually, almost 18 months. People were getting complacent. I would not say complacent, but it was becoming a norm that yes, we could transit along the Red Sea. But immediately after the incident in July, a lot of companies took the view that, okay, we must not send the ships to the Red Sea. Or they have a policy. It depends, you're still allowed as long as your insurance allows you to go, of course. But that is something which we all need to be aware that these are the situations where we should be, thinking about it before we enter into a new venture. For the moment, that's all for me.
Thank you very much, Vikram. That was enlightening coming from a commercial perspective. Melinus, you are Stevenson Howell's man for the final word on sanction advice. Please introduce yourself and tell us what it means to you and your law firm of all this dynamic sanction world that we live in.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'll start by saying I'm impressed that the IDF consulted your timetable to give you a great opening in the timing of their attack today. That's very impressive. I'm Menelaos Kazoukis. I'm a partner in the maritime trade and offshore team in Stevenson Howell here in Dubai. I've been in Dubai now almost 3 years. Previous to that, I was in our London office. I do a lot of sanctions work. And I've been doing it for about 15 years now, sanctions work. I think there's been some great points already, and I'm the fifth one, so I won't bore you too much with kind of the preamble, but I've got to pick up on some of the points that have already been raised in terms of uncertainty. I think the only thing we can be certain about in terms of geopolitics, especially right now in this period, is that it's all uncertain. And I've got to really agree with Omar that this isn't normal laws. And I think what we've got to remember, and this is what the trap we fall into, because it's become normal. We've all got accustomed to sanctions in our industry. We treat them like any other regulation. It's something we have to comply with, we have to do our checks. It's just normal, it's a new law, it's a new regulation. They are not normal laws or regulations. Sanctions are foreign policy tools. They are completely separate, a separate species from most laws that we get used to. Most laws, when they propose, there'll be consultation, there'll be drafts, whether it's through ministerial councils, they get debated in parliament, they will go to stakeholders to have input, they're amended over and over again, and there is a huge lead-up time where you're aware of what's coming in. Where in shipping, we see things that come from the IMO, we see the implementation, what's coming in 5 years, in 4 years, in 6 years. Sanctions is completely different. They are there to address political, to satisfy political needs in national interests and to protect and to be a form of foreign policy, a tool, really a weapon. Historically, sanctions are one level before war. They're an economic blockade. It's one country imposing restrictions which have severe consequences on people of another state, of another sovereign nation, or sometimes on a sovereign nation itself. So this was always considered the last step before military conflict. And the fact that we have now normalized sanctions and that we just deal with them, that they're just another rule, just like some sulfur restrictions or this, is the best testament to see how far this has come along and how much of a foreign policy tool it has become, in particular for Western nations. And it is why we also see completely contradictory application, but we don't see consistency, that it's not, this is the rule, if you do this, you will have sanctions. This is part of the problem. So for lawyers, it's extremely difficult because you can have, for example, and we have seen it, you can have an executive order today, suddenly changing sanctions, which will come into force next week. It could be something which is completely contradictory to something that happened 2 months ago. We've seen in the European Union, there's a Council of Ministers meeting, they all sit there and say, for example, we have to take steps against country X because there's a political motivation. They will give the European Union Law Commission 5 days because they'll come out of the meeting and say, we are going to impose these sanctions. We've decided this is what we're going to do. And the law's going to come out in 5 days. And it's a law for the European Union, for example, that has to be translated into 12 languages, be consistent in the 12 languages, and not contradict thousands, and I mean thousands of pages of sanctions and restrictions that have come in place previously. So for lawyers, if you're telling me, can you give me with some certainty where we are heading, I think the only thing that we can be certain about is it's all uncertain. Anyway, so that's it for now.
Lovely, that's fantastic. And do you break the pen, the nib of the pen after you write it? So after this point, anything I say will be charged more because I'll have to do an addendum to this advice, and then I will need to spend more time. Where do you get your information from? You watch a lot of news, a lot of current affairs.
So I think the point is, and I think some of the commercial guys here have raised this. You need to understand. If you're in shipping, we don't have a business in one country, right? The shipping industry is moving goods from one part of the world to the other part of the world. It's sending assets and money into difficult jurisdictions. You need to be up to date with geopolitics. Where are you sending your vessel? Where are you buying the cargo from? What's the cargo? What's the risk that you're buying it from a jurisdiction that's on the radar? Because whilst there is unpredictability, and we do live in very uncertain times, there is in fact some predictability. We kind of know which countries are likely to be sanctioned. We also know if they're going to be sanctioned, where would you target? Which industries are going to be targeted? So it should have been no surprise to tanker operators that there would be sanctions on the Iranian petroleum sector when they came into place in 2010. It had been kind of highlighted in the past. So when you see that there are, especially if you're concerned about US-EU sanctions, it's quite simple. They're not going to sanction their allies, are they? They will be sanctioning people who they have a direct foreign policy dispute with or an issue with, and they will target their key industries. So you have to start to speak geopolitics, you've got to be keeping an eye on what's happening, be aware, have your plan B, make your checks. So, right, but you can never give an advice, any lawyer who can give you an advice, say, don't worry at all. You just can't do that. There will always be some uncertainty.
Yeah, no, good. Thank you for your opening comments, and I'm just not a moderator. I've also jumped into it being a flag state registrar for a whitelisted Antigua flag. And I'll share a story where I was invited last year in Malta by the American senators who had sponsored a conference for 3 days, including giving the attendees a flight ticket, a hotel stay, and daily subsistence in cash at the end of each day. I was pretty surprised. And I'm going to clip that out in the recording. But saying that, my eyes were absolutely astonished by the amount of lobbying that the senators were onto. There were flag state registrars and heads of registries from around the world that were invited. The room was filled up with almost 500 people, and there were no limitations. From Antigua, there were 2 who attended. I attended from Dubai, and there was from St. John's, somebody attended. And when the mic went around, and there were a panel of risk managers, some senators were sitting, I asked them a very relevant question that when you all tell us as flag state to comply with the sanctions, being international registries, do you all in the same breath speak to the BNI clubs to do so, speak to the classification societies to do so, to the hull and machinery underwriters to do so, because I have deregistered enough vessels for being non-compliant, but the club continues to ensure the IX Classification Society. I can see an old friend of mine sitting there at the back from a very eminent classification. They do not deregister, declass the vessel. I said, how unfair is that then? Unless it is on the OPEC this year onwards, but otherwise, all the others, UN, UK, European sanctions, they continue to insure and classify the vessels. So my question was taken with a pinch of salt, and this year's such a meet, I was not invited. I blame myself for asking a direct question, but I'm glad I did. But saying that, there's a lot of pressure on us as flag state. Panama, as you know, has recently announced every vessel over 15 years, more than 15 years, will be asked to leave the flag because they are the largest registry for the dark fleet, as per the statistics go. So they had some buttons pressed wherever they did, and they had to come up with this announcement to their registry. But saying that, I'm going to represent the flag state in this, and that was my little 1.5 minutes about. But coming down to the important questions, and I'll start again with Nijo, who's holding hands, and I'm assuming expecting me to ask him a question. Nijo, you work with a lot of financial institutions, and financial institutions need to lend money, trade finance, asset finance, bills of lading, there are LCs open all around the world. What does this word sanctions mean in their world? And when they come up to you for advice, what is their language? What do they worry about, and what can you enlighten us a little, please?
Yeah, this is sort of like a double-edged sword because anything that I could say could be seen as enabling sanctions conventions. So I have to be a bit careful as to how I answer this.
I'll bail you out for it.
Famous last words, but nevertheless, so in one word again, at the risk of oversimplifying, banks want to look for authenticity in their customers. They want to see authenticity in the beneficiaries of the transaction. They want to see authenticity in the transaction. So if you have got somebody that comes up with, say for example, a corporate entity that comes up with a completely obfuscated ownership structure where you've got shell company on shell company, offshore jurisdictions, trusts, funds, and so on and so forth, where it makes it so much difficult for anybody to understand who actually owns or who is the beneficial owner of an entity. That immediately becomes a red flag. It becomes a red flag to all of us. When somebody comes and asks you in this room, say, hi, who are you? And say, oh, I am the nephew of the Grand Duke of this place who came from that. And you'll be like, hey, who are you? So banks want to look at that, for example. And similarly, in the cases of transactions, like, there are, in my previous life, when we were asked to look at give sanctions advice, you had personal accounts actually being used for industrial purchases of equipment and machinery. And you've had like things that should have costed you 50 dirhams being paid 50 million dirhams instead. So these sort of behavioral aspects, etc., the transactional aspects, banks definitely do to pick up on. Why do they do these things? And there's a whole list of things that banks can or cannot do. But one thing that everybody should understand is banks are under tremendous pressure. They're under tremendous pressure because they have to cater, at least in this region, and we're talking about the UAE since we're part of the Middle East branch. They are under tremendous pressure to cater to various sanctions regime, like Mr. Umar said. So you've got the US, the UK, the EU, the UN, the UAE has its own sanctions regime, which affects a whole lot of people that live and work here, including the companies. If a bank makes a mistake, it could be counted as a breach. So if you look at the United States sanctions regime, they've got strict liability principles, which means that you don't have to use your brain too much. There does not need to be an intention. If you have committed a breach, that's a breach. There's no two ways. Oh, I did not know. I did not intend to know. It's not an excuse. If you've committed it, you've committed it. Whereas the UK side of it is like you need to have some sort of knowledge-based intent or a reasonable sort of belief or information that you're committing a breach. So what happens if a bank misses out on one of these sanctions regimes is, in 2014, I don't want to name the bank, you can Google it, had to pay $1.1 billion as settlement to the Americans to enable it to come back into the global dollar settlement system after taking a 1-year exile from the dollar settlement sort of environment itself. You can imagine, and to go to your question, why do classes and other people do not look at, do not look at sanctions the way, unless they're OFAC, is because the dollar dominates the banking system globally. And because of that, the game is simple. Say, I have a club, or I have a set of rules. If you don't play by my rules, you don't get to participate in my game. You have to stay out. You can play some other game, you have to stay out. So if anybody is found to be manipulating a dollar-based system, and then they get to reap the benefits of dollar-based systems while doing something that is antithetical to the United States itself, that bank gets punished. So they look at authenticity in who you are as the ultimate beneficial owners, who your beneficiaries are in a transaction. Is your trade transaction as smooth as it could be? Do you have any behavioral changes? Like, do you suddenly change ownership on things like, putting in a cousin suddenly pops up from somewhere to own the business? These sort of things are instant red flags. It could be done with the greatest of positive intention, don't get me wrong. But if there is no natural flow to this, or there's no reasoning behind it, the banks definitely do red flags. And there's no two ways about it. And I wouldn't even just say it's just the banks or the financial institutions, any business. It does not have to be just the banks, because you should understand, every business needs to know who you're dealing with. The devil's in the detail, and you know the devil that you're dealing with.
Thank you. That is a fantastic overview of asset finances. But let me bring Omar into this as an extension. And I saw a question that was popped up there. Omar, locally speaking, and I'm not saying Dubai or UAE only, I bring in our northern neighborhood and the entire GCC into it. What does the local jurisdiction in all the GCC countries go with? Is it EU sanctions? Is it our own sanctions? Is it only OFAC? How do they actually, because as we all know, and the world knows, the capital of dark operations or shadow operations in the shipping world is epicentered in the GCC, transactional or asset-wise or commercial. So the rest of the world looks at this place as a hot spot for these kind of activities. So there is a lot happening. From a local perspective or local law firm, does UN, UK, EU, OFAC, individually people are named here, how do we look from a local law perspective? Doesn't have to be UAE. Can you please tell us?
Thank you very much. Just I want to make a comment, not based on what my colleague said, that the severity of sanctions, in my opinion, have turned lawyers into politicians, have forced lawyers to become politicians, and have made KYC to be the legal part. So what happens is that as a legal, like, as you just correctly said, like you would have your KYC in the bank, ask you for some documents, and the lawyers will come and give you the full set with all the stamps and all the authentication and everything. And a back desk KYC member would come and say, I'm not convinced. And that would be a showstopper for a massive operation. On the other side, the severity of sanctions has made lawyers also not become strictly lawyers rather than politicians to come and tell their clients, okay, here are your alternatives. Do you have a driver? Okay, put him in the company if there's a red flag. So it's really a strange thing, that sanctions. Going back to your question, Captain Ziri, one of the most common questions we receive actually is this one, is the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, GCC, Middle East, North Africa, a signatory to sanctions? Do they follow sanctions? And we tell them, guys, this is the wrong question because you don't sign into sanctions. Yeah, you don't join sanctions. A country cannot come and say, I'm a member of OFAC sanctions. This is a wrong anticipation. Whether you abide by sanctions or don't abide by sanctions is a foreign policy issue. It's a decision to be made by you. If you take the UAE, for example, the official stance, maybe, and again, I would love to, if I'm wrong, my colleagues correct me, the only legal side of sanctions is the UN sanctions, the United Nations sanctions, which is a very simple thing. Here's a list of people, here's a list of equipment, don't do this, don't do that, you're fine. So no one even care about it. But actually, it's the other sanction, which is again, the most scary one is OFAC, EU, UK, one, and then the local one, which is the UAE sanctions, the Saudi sanctions. You don't sign into those. It's a foreign policy thing. So if you come to the UAE, for example, the official stance, or Saudi Arabia, actually, or the GCC, they don't follow those sanctions. They're not obligated to follow OFAC sanctions or EU sanctions or UK sanctions. But that is the official statement. So with that, and I know a lot of sanctioned people who are living in the UAE, buy houses, trade, have bank accounts, living their normal life, in and out, traveling freely there. But would this statement not affect your life and business? Absolutely not. To the contrary, because banks are connected to the bigger machine, which are the international bank, will stop your work immediately. It will be much more difficult for you to use credit cards. It's much more difficult for you to establish a company. KYC will become a nightmare. But this is not because of the local law. The local law on almost, I would say, all the countries in the Arab world, or the Middle East, or the MENA region, or actually a lot of countries in Europe, for example. Like Germany says, I don't recognize OFAC, which is a European country. We follow EU sanctions. We don't follow OFAC sanctions. But that is, again, the official stand. But the German banks, if you're sanctioned, will stop all your accounts.
If it's a US dollar.
Of course. They will stop anything, even if it's euro, if it's sterling, even if it's dirham. If you have a bank account in any currency and you are sanctioned, they will stop any currency for you. Even if you are sanctioned by association, even if you are mentioned in an article which says you might be sanctioned, that will transform your financial life into a nightmare.
What about the UAE Central Bank?
Same thing. Same thing. Again, the central bank will not interfere. It's an individual policy for each bank in the UAE to decide that they will stop transacting with you. But they will stop, almost all of them. And again, I cannot name names, but almost all of them will stop working with you. So, legally speaking, from a local point of view, when it comes to the GCC, countries do not sign into sanctions. Countries take foreign policies to adapt or accept that those sanctions are abiding by them or not. All of them say, we're not abiding by OFAC, we're not abiding by EU, we're not abiding by UK. Nonetheless, almost all law firms, all banks, all financial institutions will stop working with you should you be designated in an SDN list or EU or UK sanctions.
Yeah, thank you very much. That is lawyers speaking, and like lawyers, they love giving long advices. Thank you very much. But we've got a number of questions coming. From now onwards, we'll stick to a minute-long answer. So you all were not informed before, so please don't worry. It's not a, but we've got a very interesting question for both asset and commercial operating panelists from Sumit Roy. He says, very practically speaking, very practical, ships that are barred from scrapping or are named under the list do pose a safety and pollution risk. We know a vessel which is out under our flag and there's payments pending, money is not coming through banks, crew is not paid, the vendors are not supplying food and bunkers to the vessel, and that comes down to a risk and human risk, pollution risk. So how should you think such? I know you are both operating very, very clean fleets, but from a perspective of asset owner, how do you think? Is it not a danger or a disaster waiting to strike? What do you think?
From a shipowner's perspective, the way we look at it is you're presumed guilty until proven innocent. And that's how it is. And I think one of the points that you raised, Omar, is that even if your name or your ship's name comes in any article whatsoever, which says that you have carried cargo which was sanctioned or something to that effect, unfortunately, the financial institutions or everybody else takes it in a very negative way. And then you have to go through lengths to prove yourself innocent. And that's where we're in a real tough spot. And I think, sorry, I just digress from this, but I would like to make one other point. We're just talking about sanctions. But another tool that, are we using share the house rules or?
No, go for it.
Go for it.
Yeah.
You bail me out. Is tariffs. So tariffs are being used exactly in the same way, which puts us ship owners into a very difficult situation with how to trade your vessels, how to get your financing, what parties you're going to be working with, what cargoes you can actually carry. And it all is getting to a stage where our hands are tied behind our backs. And very rightly posed question, which is like, how do the regulators actually address it? The sad reality is that the regulators are totally toothless. They would not, we are being imposed so many different constraints without the actual regulators actually stepping in. And we are actually waiting for a massive disaster to happen before somebody does something.
I agree with that, but thank you, Sumit, for asking it. It's a very relevant question, particularly with seafarers' happiness quotient being very close to our hearts as Nautical Institute. What is your view on it?
I agree with what it says. And of course, this is a disaster waiting to happen, of course. But what can be done is the question. What is the time limit of enforcement of the sanction? Now, the very fact that the vessel has been trading in the dark, or maybe she is sanctioned, means she is sanctioned, so the time limit is already gone. The only way out we have to think now, we have an asset floating on the sea, and we all can get affected somehow or the other should there be a disaster. How do we prevent it? That's the thing, and that's where the owners should get, in my opinion, I mean, it's an open forum, I guess, and I can open this thing for others also to answer. The flag state is the first person he should approach, asking for help, because that's where the ship is registered. Just to answer the question straight to the point, what's the time limit for enforcement of sanctions? I mean, there is no time limit, of course. Once you are sanctioned, you have to be patient, and you have to be following the rules and follow up diligently on a daily basis with the flag, with the class. That's where you have to be, as he said, guilty till proven. So you have to ensure that you are trying to put up the right thing, the facts to the flag, because in any case, you can't, as an owner, as an asset owner, you can't wash your hands off the asset. God forbid something goes wrong, you will still be held liable. So that's where we are actually. There is no immediate answer to this. The only way would be to keep checking with the regulators, get to the facts. If there is a penalty, he will have to pay. As of now, I don't know, but that is what the law would say. Am I right? Right? So that's where the law, we have to follow the law, whichever jurisdiction you will be, but you have to follow the law.
Depending on the lawyer.
Of course. And if you go to Omar, he'll help you out.
Lovely. Well, you had a point to make. And I want to follow up after you make the point on Anuj's question. He is asking about primary and secondary sanctions. And also, somebody anonymous has asked about UANI, the UANI vessel list. Does that mean anything in the aspect of, please?
Sure. I think the first point I'll make is the question that was regarding a vessel that needs to be scrapped as a ticking time bomb. The reality of it is the entire dark fleet is a ticking time bomb, because we're talking about vessels average age over 25 years old. These are vessels which would have been scrapped had it not been for sanctions. So these are vessels which have insurance, quote unquote. I mean, it's questionable. So if you have one of these tankers having a casualty incident somewhere, huge pollution spill, are their insurers really going to meet any of those, the impact of that? I think the entire fleet is one of the unintended consequences of when you impose sanctions. So all it's done, it's pushed away the lawful trading. So this void will always be filled by people who aren't particularly worried or concerned about US sanctions. They don't do any business in the US, they don't get paid in dollars, they deal with banks that don't really care about dollars, insurers that don't care. But these can be dangerous in terms of potential impact if something goes wrong. So if something goes wrong, I would have a real big question mark over whether or not there will be wreck removal, pollution, protection. They're all a ticking time bomb. And that's what people need to be well aware of. And it's unintended consequences. We had it with the EU a few years ago where they sanctioned Russian coal. And it seems a good idea to prohibit Russian coal being used even outside of Europe. They were effectively extraterritorial. That created a huge unintended consequence of providing energy insecurity for a lot of the third world. A lot of countries which depend on coal to generate power, to generate heat. And there was an unintended consequence which had to then be backtracked by the European Union. Primary, secondary sanctions, I think the easiest way without getting too complicated. So let's just use the US sanctions as an example. So the US sanctions typically would be directed at US persons. So if you're a US person, an American national or American company, you cannot do these things. So it's sovereign nation imposing restrictions on its own people and its own companies. Secondary sanctions are the ones which get a bit more tricky, because these no longer target your own nationals or companies within your country, but you start imposing sanctions which have an effect no matter who does it. Now, there's lots of sanctions out there. Most countries have imposed sanctions. There's North Korean sanctions. I don't really care about North Korean sanctions. I'm not going to go to North Korea. I don't trade in North Korean won. It doesn't mean anything to me. If Papua New Guinea imposes sanctions that I'm breaching, I don't really care. The US, as Nico and other people have mentioned, they've got the dollar. It's the US dollar system. And they simply say to you, if you touch anything that is a breach, even if we've imposed restrictions, which we don't really have a right to do, we can't tell other countries' citizens what to do and what not to do. But if you do that, that's fine. We can't put you in prison, but you know what we're going to do? You are out of the US dollar system, because we will tell our banks, do not process any dollar payments. So if you're in international trade or in maritime and you're not part of the dark fleet, completely sheltered from all of this, it's the last thing that you want to happen to you. It's catastrophic for you. They found what is their weapon. The weapon is the financial tools, because of the strength of the US dollar in international trade. That's why people care about OFAC sanctions. That's why people are worried. That's why people who have no connection to the US are saying, is this going to be an issue? This is why banks are worried, because Nijo talked about some of the fines. Really interesting fact, not many US banks get sanctioned for inadvertently breaching sanctions. European banks, though, they don't get six-figure fines, they're billion-dollar fines. I'll give you an example, a real-world example. I was acting for a leading European bank. One of their borrowers was designated. Okay, so the bank is suddenly faced with a situation where you have a borrower who has to pay money. You no longer can pay the money has to be sent to a special account that's policed by OFAC, separate. It was a nightmare for them. I applied for a license. The license process, 9 months. Now the charterer of their vessel was a US oil major. They got their license the next day. The next day, they got the license to trade the vessel and take their charters and do whatever they had to do, and it got extended 3 times. Us, innocent bank, which did absolutely nothing wrong, 9 months. And because what we go back to the beginning, it's a foreign policy tool. Are you going to look after your own? More likely than not. Are you imposing? I mean, the contradictory approach is obvious. I was also involved with a US vessel on her maiden voyage. On her maiden voyage, US flagged, she hit an Iranian vessel that was sanctioned. I spoke to OFAC and they said, don't worry, we'll get you the license tomorrow. You'll have it tomorrow. And we got a license within, it's the quickest license we've ever seen from OFAC, because it was a US interest and they said, well, we'll protect our own, don't worry about it. Good luck if you're a European bank, European owner, or anything like that. So it's an incredibly controversial thing. Sorry, I'm killing my 1 minute time limit, sorry. It's a very controversial thing to impose restrictions on other people, on other nationals. But as Nijo said, they can say, well, we're not going to put you in prison, but I'll tell you what we're going to do. You can't play our game anymore. If you want to do anything with the US dollar or the euro or whatever, you've got to play by our game. And of course, the wording of sanctions language is always going to be quite murky and difficult to decide. So that's deliberate. If it's black and white, you know what you can do and what you can't do. If I know what I can do, I will do up to the black line. If it's lots of grey, what am I going to do? Am I going to risk my insurance telling me to go away? Am I going to risk my bank shutting my bank accounts? When you've talked about people being designated, I know people who've had their bank accounts shut down, big owners, because they were doing lawful Iranian trading. They had licenses to trade food to Iran. And the banks would say, it's just too much of a headache for us. We've seen also, forget even being on the radar, nationals. You're a ex-nationality, there is no way, we can say, it's not something which is not public knowledge. Good luck being Russian and going and opening a UK bank account. It don't have to be connected to anything. It's just, the nationality is just too many red flags because the risk of it being in breach is just too great. So, of course it's controversial. When the Iranian sanctions were introduced in 2010, there were European oil majors who had huge investments in Iran, and they fell out big time, spectacularly, some of the EU members with the states. And how dare you do this? How convenient that all the oil majors can do their projects around the world fine, and you've targeted the one jurisdiction where US oil majors can't go. So of course it's always going to be political.
Yep. No, thank you for that input. Look, I'm conscious of it being 8 o'clock, but I'm going to extend it by another 15 minutes because it's getting interesting. There are a lot of questions that are still coming up, which tells me that people are engaging. But I want to bring in again the asset owners, and the commercial duo that we have. Now, you know, the charter your vessels on long-term basis, where they get sub-chartered sometimes, you're put in pools, and I mean, the easiest thing for an asset owner is to say, here's your annual charter, party, and then go away, remind you. But then how do you monitor? How do you worry about it? Because the asset is yours. If they do dodgy trade or borderline dodgy trade, which may be later on declared as being dodgy trade, what are the checks and balances? So we are a chartered institute. I have to ask you a chartered institute related question on this. How should a charterer worry, or how should an asset owner worry about a charterer or a sub-charterer or sub-charterer or a container ship, thousands of boxes going in? How do you check and balance that?
So to be honest, there is no one answer. So when we are chartering the vessel, you have to go through an entire due diligence process with your charterers, go up to to the UBO and his mother's name and whatever not. So you need to really tick all the right boxes. But one of the things that I would say, anytime where you are doing like the one that Minalis was saying, where you're doing but you're doing a non-sanctioned trade, that is one of those things that you got to be extremely, extremely careful. And just out of practical experience, I can say, if your AIS switches off by 10 seconds for whatever reason, and nowadays with the spoofing and all of that, trust me, you straight away go from green to amber.
Yeah.
And if it switches on for more than a day, you are straight away into red. And everyone has access to it. To get it out of that is virtually impossible. So you can go because all of that has been monitored by different agencies who are looking at it. It's impossible to get yourself off that amber or red. It just says that you can go and give explanations every time that you go and charter your vessel again. But good luck to you to keep answering all of that. So I would say exercise due caution, ensure that you, especially in trades where you're going to sanctioned countries with lawful trades, you need to be knowing exactly what cargo, what UN number, whether it is on the sanctions list or not. Even if it is for example, if you're looking at LPG, if you're loading butane is maybe sanctioned, isobutane may not be. So you have to be very careful with how your cargo is described. So I cannot tell you how important this is, and please make sure that it is checked through your PMI club with regulators, and God.
So, very well said, and thank you very much. Would you pull the plug out, like Nitin said, if you have a AIS that is blocked and it's your vessel, do you have provision in the charter party to pull the plug when something like that happens?
See, I'll start with the first question what you had asked.
Yes.
When we are preparing the charter party, we have to be very specific with regards to trading area these days. Just a simple example, a lot of people might not go to the Red Sea these days, and it is entirely up to the ship owner whether he decides to send the vessel to the Red Sea or not. Right? So, as far as when we say that we are giving our assets on time charter or to pool managers, we can always specify at the time of preparing the agreement or the time charter party. That is number one. Now, coming back to what Nitin says, that of course, there are people who could be, asking you, like a lot of oil majors, they come back regularly asking for AIS stoppages. This is very common these days. I believe many of you will be aware. AIS, because of the very fact that there has been spoofing a lot, all the oil majors during tanker charter parties, when they find out, they always come back to the owner. And that's where we have to keep records. Of course, nobody is switching off the AIS, but you can always prove it by way of sending the logbook entries or some sort of entry on the ship, including the position list, etc. Right? Many times, even the oil majors, they understand and they will accept it. It's not a no-go, like you can't say that, okay, you have been, okay, I agree that you can go to the amber and into the red. As long as you have the explanation, you are okay. What is of major or greater significance is, if there are parties, and there are parties from like Economics Register, they can put your ship into a high risk category. And that's where you come into the scanning radar, I would say. So those are the things which can really put up a red flag, and that's where you have to be answerable and you have to be cautious. A simple example I just give, this has recently started, Ukraine sanctions. Right? So if a master goes, let's say, as you just mentioned, Russian trying to open a bank account in UK. If a Russian master, you have still Russians sailing everywhere, they are allowed everywhere. If a Russian master goes to a Ukrainian port now, he will be sanctioned. And the next thing is, if the charterer is from Ukraine, he has the right to withhold the freight. This is a major concern. A lot of queries are coming about Russian masters. Where do they stay? Where are they from? Where did they sign off? Where did they sign on? These are the type of questions we are receiving at times with regards to them. And the Ukrainian sections are totally new.
Wow.
Totally new. And it is coming up, showing up on various apps here and there that yes, this is very much in force. As long as there are Russian crew on board and the vessel has called to Russia in the past, the vessel is liable to come under Ukrainian sanctions. So these are few things which are coming up on a daily basis, new sanctions, new regime.
Where do you look for them? What newspaper do you read?
There are a lot of apps. I will not name all of them. Our check is there, of course.
Good. Nijo has been quiet for a while, and I promised Alex I will ask the question that she puts up, and this one's for you, Nijo. Have you made money out of this? Have you got somebody out of the list so far, and how often? Because the second question is also linked to that first question that Alex has asked. What are the rates of success of people successfully being removed from sanction lists?
Yes to both. So we have had vessels being off-listed from OFAC quite successfully. It takes as long as it takes. That's just the simple answer to it, simply because as Martha was actually saying, is the evidence that you can actually give to show why this vessel, entity or company should not be on the sanctions list. And to their credit, to be really honest, and we just particularly talked about OFAC, they are quite verbose in their communication. It's not like you've been put on something and they don't talk back to you. It takes some time for them to register and then revert back, but then there is a conversation that can be had. There are cases where vessels are sanctioned because the commercial management of the vessel was common, and that commercial manager was sanctioned. So what happens is that it's a recent phenomenon where every vessel that is under that commercial manager's management suddenly gets listed because there is an interest of that manager in the vessel. So the shipowner is like, WTF, the charter is the same, and nobody has an answer. So then one has to prove that that vessel, like how he said, that when you prove your logs, you prove where the vessel location was on the dates, around the times in which they say that such and such vessel has been engaged in negative trade, and then I think my strike rate was right about around 7.5 months. is what it took for a back and forth. But I can tell you one thing, whether it's for a ship or for a person or for a company, the stigma is more painful than the disease itself. See, because what happens is so people keep throwing about these terms like dark fleet, there are these untouchables, these sort of things. Who creates these words? Did you know that the word PEP, politically exposed person, was actually created by World Equity Check? It's a private company, right? The problem is that everybody has actually given their compliance, maintenance to a software, to somebody else that you subscribe for. Obviously, if you pay you money for it, so it should be right. So the problem is that even if you're successfully getting a ship or a company out of the sanctions, what happens is that these global sort of sanctions compliance softwares will then say X person or X vessel was X OFAC. That will come up on your compliance. Would you then charter a vessel that says, oh, it was on OFAC, but now it's not? It isn't.
Scarface syndrome.
There you go.
Remains a scar.
There you go. So the stigma is even worse. So then you have to start engaging with them, with different publications, like all of your shipping and trade publications say, please stop calling them as the dark fleet. Please take them out from your list. Speak with the Yuani and then say, why are you putting these people in? So, and many a times what happens then, the difficulty that I've faced is how do you prove a negative? How do you prove that you did not do something? I don't know. How do you prove that you did not sail there? How do you prove that you did not do it? Because whatever evidence that you prove, will be like, oh, you could have done it, should have done it. So this is the stigma that comes in, and that is a bigger problem than any of the questions that Alex had raised, which is the fact that yes, you can, and they have a dialogue, you can get it out. The only one thing is that the way that you get put onto the list is not the way that you get out, because they don't give you sort of like an OFAC certificate saying, yes, you're now off the list. So you don't do that. So what you do is you approach a good law firm for them to do a legal opinion, so that they will tell you and your financial institution that we've done the checks, we've done this, and these people are not on the list. So please take my word for it, or my professional indemnity insurance is on call. But this is the problem. The stigma hurts more than the actual disease. So regardless of whether you're in or on, off of it, the problem is how do you prove to everybody else that you're on?
So very cheaply, somebody anonymous has written that Prime Minister Modi is still on the SDN list.
Probably is, no?
He's still the Prime Minister of our country.
Yeah, I mean, so
it doesn't matter.
the Indian Prime Minister is in many lists. The most good-looking men's list as well. You don't have to believe.
Very well said. Whoever that anonymous is. Does he want to put a hand up her? Anybody who put that? Very nice. And he needed an ice. There you go. We needed an icebreaker. But Omar, coming to you, thank you, Nijo. That was a fantastic explanation. And I think the answer was very clear. The answer is yes. How long is questionable. You can get off the list. So, Omar, what is the expectation of due diligence when it comes to sanctions? Because also Bildu wants to know about OPEC and collaboration with member countries on the oil price, despite of not having formal government authority. But when somebody comes and says due diligence, I'm going to buy this ship or do a background check, what actually wants to know?
Speaking until now, it's only the only thing which is missing from OFAC is my mother's name. Like everything. Yeah, it's everything from the ground up. I mean, it's the company when it was established, the trade license, the shareholders, every single document related to the shareholders, their passports, their IDs, proof of residence, their banking details, up to the UBO, up to the ultimate person with every possible check you can think of.
How much they pay basically? You go on checking.
Exactly, but that's the comment I said that the KYC became the legal. Actually, they became the lawyers and the judges. So you have like KYC people, whether they are experienced or not. Actually, those are the people at the backstage which you will not even allowed to see, and they could be educated or not educated, specialized in shipping or not even specialized in shipping, while telling you your deal is on or not, which is again another catastrophe. It's especially in the banking system. Which is happening, but the expectation of KYC became extremely onerous and extremely difficult and heavy in the past few years because of sanctions. So it's something which is illegal, not legal, dictated, and illegal KYC and which can give, and a decision which you cannot appeal by KYC saying we don't want to deal with you because you know what, we did not like a stamp here, or you were missing a signature here, or something a lot of times not even justifiable. So to go to that, KYC expectations or the requirements are every possible document which relates to every aspect of the company, from its establishment, to trade license, to the managers, to the shareholders, up to the ultimate UBO, regardless how long the chain is.
What's the difference between sanctions and sanctions by an association?
Oh, I mean, actually, that's a very, very good question. Sanctions are sanctions, which is IOR listed and SDN. Sanctions by association, the simplest example I can give you is like a company is sanctioned, but the shareholders are not sanctioned. As long as the shareholders are shareholders in this company, they're sanctioned by association. The minute they leave the company, they're out of the, by default from the sanctioned company. So sanctioned by association, where you're associated to something which became sanctioned. You are an owner of a vessel. The vessel gets sanctioned, but you are not sanctioned as an owner. But as long as you're named as the owner of the vessel, you're sanctioned by association. You have to remove your name out of the vessel ownership. Then by default, you're not under the umbrella of the sanction. But again, I think that brings us back to what Niju said, the stigma. Even then, you're tainted.
Yeah.
And everyone will come and say, oh, the vessel which you own is sanctioned. So there's a big, big question mark.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, I know one guy who has Iran in his surname. And he's not sanctioned. So there is some rationale behind it.
Yes.
It's not a cow, yeah. It's not, yeah. So it's not a free fall. Yes, it's not a cost. So here's my last 7 minutes that we have. We're going to close at 8:30. What I want to do is ask each one of you all to contribute, and unless you've been quiet for a while, to tell us as an audience, what would you let out as free advice to our audience to take away in today's volatile world with such dynamism happening? Maybe a charterer, maybe a broker, or somebody trying to charter a vessel. What would your advice be? What should they look out for? What are the take-home points? What should they look for? It's a common question. Everyone's
Yeah, sure. So the starting point is don't do things post facto. So by that I mean don't get yourself into trouble and then go and try and find lawyers to get you off the OFAC list, or can we get a license? Can we do this? You've got to be proactive. Look, it's a difficult world. It's an unpredictable world. There's a lot of uncertainty. Uncertain times are great opportunities to make money because it's a time which can be really good for doing business. You need to be doing it smart. So you need to follow your KYC. Make sure you know who you're contracting with. Okay, critical. It's the most important thing right now. Okay, stay up to date probably is important, but once you get down to doing a transaction, entering a charter, sales contract, whatever you are doing, know who you're dealing with. You don't want to get a nasty surprise that you suddenly find that maybe a payment's been held up because it's a red flag, or because there's a sanctioned person, or it's very easy to do your due diligence. You can delegate that. There's lots of services out there, including lawyers and database of maritime intelligence. They will do the KYC for you. Okay, make sure you've ticked that box. First and foremost, have a plan B. Always have a plan B. What do we do if there is a problem? Do you have a sanctions clause that works for you in your contract? There's BIMCO sanctions clauses, there's standard form wording that people copy paste. Does it work for you? Look at what would happen in the event that you load a cargo that gets sanctioned. Does that work for you, or do you need to have a bespoke clause that works for you? Diversify. Don't have all your eggs in one basket. If you're doing a line of service, for example, and all your trade is with one potentially troubled jurisdiction that could come up, you might find yourself in a world of trouble. I used to work with a company that did a niche business in Yemen. They were very profitable if they don't exist anymore. Their entire market closed overnight. The same thing happened in Syria. There were some niche operators doing a lot of Syrian work. They had no diversification. You had people doing Russian work who suddenly found themselves in an uncomfortable position. So always diversify. Don't have your portfolio completely stuck in one jurisdiction, one type of cargo. And if you follow these kind of key rules of know who you're dealing with, make sure that they're not on you're going to have no nasty surprises. Protect yourself contractually. Have a way out. Have an exit. Have a plan B in case it all goes wrong. And finally, I would just say diversify. Make sure that if the worst happens, you've got other parts, other trades that pick it up.
Fantastic. Now, by going first, you made the other two lawyers think hard because they're not allowed to repeat. They're not allowed to say like Melissa said, and we agree with what Melissa says. So they'll have to come up with.
But lawyers are a brotherhood, so I represent all our views.
No, they'll have to come up with new ideas. But before we go away to Omar and Nijo, give them time to think now that I've put them in the spot. You'll have to come up with new advice. But Vikram, a lot of people here are commercial operators. A lot of people here put their vessels or book NVOCC book slots on vessels which are doing multi-trade, maybe vessels which have chemical vessels with parcels, and some of the parcels are dealing with multi-trade. And a lot of that combination, what I'm saying is, it's easy to say there's a VLCC engine dashing on here there. Maybe brokers was doing S&P who have to look at vessels and where they've been trading, and then now it's come on the desk, say, sell this vessel for me. So commercial operators, what should they watch for? How will it put them into trouble? What are the contracts to look for? What are the clauses? Can you please guide us?
Look into the charter party you're dealing with. Read it carefully. Read all the clauses, especially pertaining to the sanctions clause, which has been said. Also, additionally, you should be aware what cargo you are dealing with, what are your destination ports, how can you ensure that whatever you are doing with regards to that voyage is legal. And that's where, again, I will go back to checking the background checks as we started. So whenever we start a new voyage, we have to ensure the KYC is correct in the right perspective, which includes not only the other party, also the cargo. Who is the shipper? Who's the receiver? Or who's the owner of the cargo? All those aspects have to be checked. Finally, I would say during the voyage, of course, you have to take care of the cargo. That is precisely the point at the moment, considering the fact that we are only discussing the sanctions. The next thing is the sanctions itself. Whatever we do, whatever the routing you are taking during the voyage, it has to be performed in the best possible way, ensuring that you don't even go near the territory. A lot of ships which went past between Egypt and, let's say, Sihan in Turkey, they used to pass by close to Cyprus, but unfortunately, due to spoofing, a lot of them would end up showing into Syria. Recently, about 2 months back, a lot of ships within the Persian Gulf, although they may have been at Ras Tanura, they were all showing in the middle of Iran. So those are the things where this thing comes up during the voyage. As an operator, you have to highlight it immediately. Keep a record. Of course, you can always prove that you can't be there, but that is where the record keeping comes during the voyage. And just carry out. I mean, there's nothing much you can do during the voyage other than the fact that you do the right thing at the right place at the right time. That's all.
Lovely, thank you. Omar, we got a friend here who supplies paint to vessels, and what if that vessel has gone to these funny trading countries, and he supplies paints to that company, that vessel she's dried up here. We got classification societies who probably are all the time asked to class vessels, and they're class hopping, flag hopping. We get them all the time. And it's all happening here. Dubai Dry Docks is here, the suppliers is here, everything's here. what are the consequences locally? And what should local businesses, I mean, we as surveyor, as a client, would we get named? What are the secondary, worries that we carry on our shoulders by being just honest people who are just, going about selling paints and classifying vessels? What is your advice to them? What is the take home?
There's a table in Shibriani, on the restaurant. I call it the sad table.
Is it?
3 years ago, I was sitting there with 3 major vessel owners, and they were casually talking about their business. And I overheard what they're saying. I told them, guys, if you continue doing what you're doing, you'll be sanctioned. And their reply to me said, but Omar, this is what we do normally. This is what we do, like every day. It's normal. 1 month after they got sanctioned. Okay. So my advice to them, the takeaway from this story, is that do not resort in this current legal or illegal or irrational climate of sanctions. Do not resort to logic. Do not resort to normal. You have to keep yourself updated every day with what's happening. And you cannot come and say, this is the articles of my portion, this is what I used to do every day. This is fine, I will continue. I am the one which will not get sanctioned. Okay? Because you will be the one who gets sanctioned. And I don't speak on behalf of my firm, I speak of myself, Stevenson Harwood, all the reputable law firms actually out there. Guys, in this current climate, your best friend is your dog and your lawyer. Do not leave home without them. Really, really. Don't listen to your commercial logic of doing business. Pick up the phone and talk to your lawyer and ask. That can save your business for sure. That's my advice.
Fantastic. Any money you make out of this conversation, there should be a sponsorship that ICS should get. If you get extra.
I mentioned all the law firms, to be clear.
Yes, you did.
All of them are great.
All of them sponsor ICS event teams. But Nitin, I know you are very choosy about the ship managers for your vessels and assets. And I'll give you an example of 5 vessels that came for flagging with Antigua and Barbuda. They came to us because their ship manager, was named because he was managing a few of the dark fleet vessels which were named. As a result, the ship manager was listed off. Was in one of those funny lists. So the others, which are innocent and honest, wanted out of that ship manager because one of the other flags has a blanket said, "Oh, you'll be managed by this company which is listed, so you're out of our flag as well." So it came up to our thing to say that look, there's nothing wrong with the vessels as such, other than the fact that they were managed by this company which was listed. So how do you, as an asset owner, worry about such things? I just give you an example. You don't have to answer what remedy you might have as an asset owner. But as an asset owner, I'm sure that you must be having to worry about it. Let's say a yard where a vessel is going, where they're making a number of new builds for one of those state-owned companies, which are, I don't know, how do you worry about it? What is your take for similar asset owners like you?
Right. Having run a services company during ship management before, the point that you raise is very, very valid. But that's why we generally go for the top-notch ship managers. It is much easier for them to keep a track and kick out ships from their management as and when. The smaller ship managers do have that problem. They do not really want to let go of ships because of various reasons. But from a commercial standpoint, it is really important that you choose your suppliers wisely. It is really important that you trust no one, and I really need it. And it's really important that the 3 aspects of ship owning, acquisition of assets, financing, chartering. For all of that, keep enough money for your lawyers.
What a fantastic advice. So your OPEX, there has to be a portion for the lawyers' share, like they say, the angels' share of the ski cast. But Nijo, the most difficult part has come to you because you're the last man in answering this question. What would you, I know you're going to answer on behalf of financiers, but if you want to blanket answer, please don't repeat what the others have. But tell us what you think an average Joe charterer, or any ship operator, any commercial guy should worry about? What would you tell them to watch for? And maybe he wants a bank loan. How would he go about it, or LC open?
Yeah. So I'm not going to repeat exactly what the others have said, but I began speaking in this panel by using the word uncertainty. I think I'll close with the word certainty, which means that whether it's the banks, whether it's your counterparties, be certain of yourself, making sure that you've got enough, as Umar said, as Manila said, make sure that you know that you're updated on what the sanctions regimes are, what are the troubles that you can encounter today. You can't tell about tomorrow, because tomorrow, as you would have seen in certain countries, that a man wanted dead or alive is the best looking man now, and he is number one pals with the country that wanted him dead or alive. So it could think of this which you do not know. So today, be certain of yourself. 2, be certain of the counterparties that you're dealing with. Don't keep chasing every deal in the horizon and then then get bitten by something that you don't want to get bitten by. Be certain of your counterparties. 3, be certain of the trades that you do. Do what you do best. Right now is not the time to actually experiment unless and until you've got all the other peripherals also under control. So these 3 certainties are the certainties that financiers want from their clients. These are the certainties that your counterparties also depend on you to get the deal done. And these are the ways in which that you can take things forward without too much of an issue. Because always remember, perception, again, we come back to the stigma thing. Perception is a bigger evil than the actual sin that is committed. So you tend to suffer from a negative perception if you're not careful, and the only way you can benefit yourself is if you are confidently facing the world, saying, I'm certain of who I am and what I am as a company. I know who I am dealing with, and I know my trades well. I don't think you run into much problems.
Yeah, sorry, I'll just say one thing. I think Manalas touched upon this. In times of uncertainty, also provides the largest opportunity. So I would say to everyone here, if it could be done by everyone, it's not really worth your time. But you need to find opportunities here because there are quite a significant amount. And of course, you have to go go through the motions and make sure you do take the proactive approach towards protecting yourself. But there are opportunities galore when times are turbulent like this.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, please, anybody wants to finish our last one?
And I'll finish on that because I know I did say that difficult times, uncertain times are great opportunities, and that is completely correct. But don't be a victim of FOMO, on fear of missing out. Because I remember when the first Russian sanctions were imposed and there were still a lot of people considering what they were doing, I had calls where I told people that's a problem. They're sanctioned, the whole trade you're thinking of doing is sanctioned, it's a bad idea, I wouldn't do it. And even if you're not worried about the sanctions per se, you're not going to have insurance, you're not going to have any protection if something goes wrong. And the answer